It's a Mailbag Monday. Let's talk about the electric debut of Jordan Wicks for the Chicago Cubs.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, freelance baseball writer and podcaster, and thank you for making this your first listen every single day. To the everydayers who are here with us every single day, excited to have you. Glad you're part of this journey with us. If you're new to the show, do us a favor, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever it might be. And if you're on YouTube, do us a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you know when we drop an episode. As we do every single Monday, this is the mailbag episode full of questions from listeners of the show. Best way to get them to us, probably the subtext. Links in the episode description, links in the show notes. But after we talked about the Chicago Cubs on Friday, for Friday's show, we dropped our prospect rankings for the Cubs. We spent, that'll be right here, we spent so much time on who is the number 3 prospect in the system that we never really had a chance to talk about some of the depth guys who could impact the team this year. And they called up Jordan Wicks, the left-hand pitcher, over the weekend to make a start versus the Pirates, and it was absolutely phenomenal. 5 innings pitched against Pittsburgh, 2 hits, 1 run, it was a solo shot, 1 walk to 9 strikeouts. Jordan Wicks is the first pitcher to allow the first 3 batters to reach base and then no others in the outing and win since Boston's Louis Tiant did it against the Tigers on September 28th, 1974. So historic as far as what he was actually able to do. Now, 2021 first rounder out of Kansas State, and they saw him getting to the bigs relatively quickly. So this wasn't a complete surprise. Started off the year in Double-A in the Southern League, and then went to Triple-A. Combined between those two levels, 7-0, 3.55 ERA in 91 in the third innings, 99 strikeouts, so 9.8 per 9, 232 walks, 3.2 per 9, and 12 home runs allowed for Jordan Wicks. Now, my everydayers know we talk about the Southern League and how in the first half of the season in the Double-A Southern League, pitchers had the advantage because of those tacky baseballs. And yes, he did really well in the Southern League to start 2023. 4-0, 3.39 ERA, 10.6 strikeouts per 9, 2.9 walks per 9. When he moved to AAA, he got 7 starts in Iowa. The numbers weren't that different. And they were close enough where you could see, okay, this was just going to a different level of competition, right? 3.82 ERA, still 3-0 record. He did not lose. He did not take a loss in a decision this year in the minors, but 3.82 ERA, so just under half a run of ERA. Strikeout rate went from 10.6 to 8.2, so it did come down. Walk rate went from 2.9 to 3.5, so it did go up. But nothing egregiously ridiculous to say he obviously was performing over his head with those Double-A baseballs. And what he did in that start was really impressive against Pittsburgh, with the caveat of it's Pittsburgh. They've had some injuries. They have some young players in the lineup. They've got Henry Davis playing right field, things like that. But what I was really impressed with, you can see he is a Cubs pitcher when you watch him pitch, right? The fastball, both 4-seamers and 2-seamers. The 4-seamer is a cut ride fastball, sits anywhere between 91 and 95. Has a 2-seamer with that run as well. But all of this is to set up a devastating changeup, right? I've seen 60 grades on the changeup. I've seen 70 grades on the changeup. It's hard to know exactly probably where it should be, but it's safe to say it is a very good changeup. And he leaned on that changeup in the outing and then sprinkled everything else in. It disguises really well off of the fastball. It's in the same slot. It's in the same arm speed, but obviously it comes out sitting 80 to 83, has a lot of kind of late drop to it. He threw it 27 times, got 12 swings on it, and 9 of those were whiffs. 9 of those were swings and misses. Again, predominantly changeup, and then fastball, sinker after that. I was very impressed how he left the sinker almost every time. Facing a righty, left the sinker down and away, dotting that corner almost every time. Very good sinker placement. Not something that we necessarily knew he could do. The Statcast read the slider as a cutter. That's fine. Very similar. But he threw a lot of those inside to lefties, like a back foot, hit them there, and then a curveball that I think one of them was a called strike and all the rest were significantly below the zone. Bounced maybe 3 or 4 of those. I was very impressed with what Jordan Wicks did, and obviously going to stick in the rotation now. I think at least short term, you could see this as this is probably your Marcus Stroman replacement for the rest of the season, provided everything works out. The hope would be is that you're not going to lose Marcus Stroman, that maybe because of the injury he won't opt out, and you'll keep him. And if so, this gives you a talented lefty to throw into this rotation, because right now, this rotation, Justin Steele, another lefty. So you'd have Steele and Wicks as lefties. You'd have Hendricks, Jameson Taillon, who I still think when he's healthy can be better than what he's shown, and Marcus Stroman as righties. Javier Assad's in there as well. This is a rotation that you could legitimately be worried about in the postseason. I don't know about Stroman this year, but Steele and Wicks, 1 and 2, 2 tough lefties at the top of a rotation, and then a veteran like a Kyle Hendricks, Jameson Taillon as a number 4, you can do a lot worse than that. And again, this is assuming Stroman's not back this year. Very impressed with what he did, and I don't necessarily know how sustainable it is, right? This is something, not a ton of major league scouting reports and video on him. Obviously, the teams have more access to stuff than we do. If I can give you a scouting report, I guarantee you they can give one that's a lot better than mine, but we'll see how he does down the stretch. I like the fact that he's just now getting towards 100 innings on the season, and you have to think he's fine for a month plus however long you're in the postseason for, provided you're in the postseason. So really excited about the Jordan Wicks debut. Another question we got in response to that episode was about Alexis Hernandez. 37 games in the complex this year. He was a 2022 IFA, signed for $1 million, didn't have a great year last year in the DSL. I mean, looking at it, it was like 244, 333, 342 was the slash line. Not a great year in the DSL. In the complex this year, 315, 407, 515. 3 home runs, 16 extra base hits in 37 games, 18 walks, 250 strikeouts, 9 of 11 on stolen bases. And it really feels like it was a month-by-month thing. The month of June, 15 games in the month of June, 390, 446, 525. Absolutely absurd in the month of June. And then slowed down to the point where August was 208, 269, 417. The thing for Alexis Hernandez, still has strikeout issues, right? He can work a deep count. He can work a walk. The pitch recognition isn't terrible. The real question I have offensively is, where is the power ceiling for Alexis Hernandez? Obviously, you have to consider the fact that he's 18 years old. He turns 19 right after Christmas and listed at 6 foot 155. Obviously, still physical development to be done. So where is he going to end up? I don't necessarily know, but I do think that defensively, he gives you some good defense in the infield, needs more arm strength. He played mostly short and second in the complex. He played a little bit of third base, but he needs more arm strength to play third. And as he physically develops and gets that home run power, he's also going to develop some arm strength. Where is it going to end up? That's really the big question. In just a minute, I've got a question from subtexter Mark about Michael Busch versus Jorbit Vivas of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And we'll get to that next right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Dave. At one time or another, we've all needed a little financial help, and that's why Dave is great. Dave can help you get cash when you need a hand between paychecks, and can help you build credit by settling your extra cash advances on time. It's the banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. When you download Dave, you can get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's all part of Dave's extra cash account. You can advance the money you need with no interest and then settle up later. and you build credit when you settle up on time. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to make their finances easier. So if you're in a pinch, get the help you need by downloading Dave. Download Dave today at dave.com/MLB. That's dave.com/MLB. You'll get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. So download the Dave app now or go to dave.com/MLB. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees do apply. Banking services are provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Subtexter Mark had a great question for us. We sent out an alert to the subtext, letting those folks know that Michael Busch had been called back up to the Dodgers. And so that started a great conversation between me and Mark talking about Michael Busch versus Jorbit Vivas of the Dodgers. So Busch called back up, real quick on him, 88 games in AAA. He was a 2019 first rounder by the Dodgers and actually was up early this year. Didn't necessarily go great at the major league level. He got sent back down, and then he's been up as of time of recording for, I believe, 3 or 4 games right now. Collective slash line in those 19 games, 185, 274, 296. 1 home run, 4 extra base hits, 7 walks to 19 strikeouts. Again, in 19 games for Michael Busch, 1 for 1 on stolen bases. He's played third base. He's DH some. He's played second base. He got a couple inning or 2 out in left field. That's the Dodgers thing, right? They rotate guys through positional versatility. They want you to play a bunch of positions. But in AAA, in those 88 games this year, he's been really good. 323, 432, 615, 24 home runs, 51 extra base hits, again in 88 games, so way more than 1 every other game. 61 walks to 80 strikeouts, and 3 of 3 on stolen bases. And the thing with Michael Busch, we do not do comps on this show because a lot of people hear a comp and they get an unrealistic expectation for what that player is going to be. This is the Jason Dominguez argument. When you compare him as a international free agent to Mickey Mantle and Mike Trout, anything less than that is disappointing to a lot of people. But Michael Busch reminds me a lot of Max Muncy, a guy that can play second, can play third, can play first. Defensively isn't amazing, but is enough to get by at all of those positions. Has a power-oriented swing, can put the ball into the air, can mash home runs. Good plate discipline. Muncy's case, he runs a little bit lower batting averages the last couple years, and Busch, I don't necessarily know if he's going to do that when he finally gets going at the major league level, but it just reminds me a lot of a Max Muncy. You like the plate discipline. He can work a count. He can work a walk. He can extend an at-bat, 7, 8, 9, run up that pitch count on a guy. You like the swing. You like the ability. It's not quite foul pole to foul pole. Michael Busch is more gap to gap, but still, there's good pop in there. And 51 extra base hits in 88 games in AAA. The question's all about the transition to the major league level and how long it's going to take him to successfully make that transition. Now, when he came back up last week, and he's mostly DH since he came back up because JD Martinez went on the IL, but when he was promoted from AAA Oklahoma City to the Bigs, his replacement in AAA was Jorbit Vivas, and I'm probably saying that wrong because what do we do on the show? We say everybody's name's wrong. Let me know in the comments if I got it wrong. But Jorbit Vivas, 2017 IFA, and has had a long road to get to where he is finally here in AAA. But 114 games this year, mostly in AA Tulsa. Like 109 of those are in AA Tulsa. But 278, 392, 427, 12 home runs, 37 extra base hits, 56 walks to 54 strikeouts, and 22 of 26 on stolen bases. The question from Mark was more about, is Vivas going to be better than Michael Busch or not? And I think that Busch has a higher ceiling than Vivas. I think Vivas might have the better floor as far as so far in AA Tulsa, he walked more than he struck out, which is not necessarily Michael Busch's thing. Not saying that Michael Busch is bad or anything, but not necessarily Michael Busch's thing. I don't think he's had a single season where he's walked more than he struck out since he's been in the Bigs. And usually in a full season, he's run over 1 strikeout per game every single year. AA Tulsa in 21, he spent 107 games there, struck out 129 times. In 22, he was divided between AA Tulsa and AAA Oklahoma City for 111 games. He struck out 167 times. Now, he walked 74, so good walk rates, but the strikeout rate is higher. Jorbit Vivas has him beat on that because Vivas has been much better at controlling the walks. Last year in High A Great Lakes, 128 games, 63 walks to 58 strikeouts. His contact ability is better than Michael Busch's. I think his speed, a lot of the scouting reports have him as average speed, 22 at 26 on stolen bases, and when you watch him, it really feels like it's not so much pure speed as it is scouting and technique and instincts, right? He knows when to go versus just having the raw speed to take off and beat you. He does do a little bit of extra work on it, but he's fast enough and he has a good enough baseball IQ to make it work. Now, defensively, he's been almost entirely a second baseman. 99 games at second, 12 games at third, and 3 DH games. And it's his arm. His arm is not good enough to be a positive addition at third base. Now, do you have to have an amazing arm to play third base? You do not. Max Muncy doesn't have an amazing arm and he plays third base. Michael Busch doesn't have an amazing arm and he plays third base. Going back to Friday's episode, Heimer Candelario for the Cubs has the worst third base arm in baseball, and he's playing third base and has a positive WAR. But Vivas has been, I'll be interested to see how much they use him at third in AAA because the arm is, again, just not good, and he has even less exposure to third base. I want to say in his 5 games in AAA, he's done 2 starts at second, 2 starts at third, and a DH start. While in Tulsa, it was 97 games at second and 10 at third. So we'll see what they do in Oklahoma City, how much exposure they give him at third base. I do think the contact ability is better. The power ceiling, to me, is significantly lower for Jorbit Vivas than it is for Michael Busch. And so if I'm trying to figure out which one's going to be a better pro, you've got the higher ceiling of Busch. You've got the higher floor of Vivas, but they're both in an organization in Los Angeles that I trust to develop players. If this was a different organization, I might be worried. I might lean towards taking Vivas's safer floor than Busch's safer ceiling, or Busch's higher ceiling. But knowing that this is the Los Angeles Dodgers, I think I feel better about Michael Busch's ceiling and him being able to reach that than I feel about Jorbit Vivas being able to raise his ceiling to put him into the ballpark of where Michael Busch is from a power perspective. Now, Dynasty, I do think now's the time to go get Michael Busch because he is probably a pretty affordable asset in Dynasty simply because it's a small sample, but you sometimes have owners who just panic when they see this guy completely struggle. 185, 274, 296 in 19 games in the majors is not a good slash line at all. And if he panics and gets rid of him, maybe you can go ahead and get him at a discount. In just a minute, had another comparison question about Roman Anthony versus Cole Young. Who would be a better pro? We'll do that next right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Sleeper. If you want the chance to win more money with less picks, head to Sleeper, the #1 sports app where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. Because what this is, dynamic payouts are live. So in short, each player projection has a multiplier attached to it, as opposed to just a preset multiplier based on the number of legs in a contest. What this means is, we just talked about the Dodgers. If you were doing a Dodgers pick on a different app, and you were picking both Freddie Freeman and Jason Hayward to hit a home run, you would get the exact same multiplier for both guys to hit a home run on a different app, right? But in real life, we know that Freddie Freeman is a lot more likely to hit a home run than Jason Hayward. And so the dynamic payout means that the Jason Hayward end of that leg has a much larger multiplier than on other apps. So with dynamic payouts, they have more stat categories to place contests on, and you can get higher payouts than other apps with less picks. Use promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Now, terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details, but they are currently operational in over 30 states, so check out Sleeper today. Okay, so going back to the mailbag, we had a question sent in email from Barry about Roman Anthony versus Cole Young. Do I think Roman Anthony has a higher ceiling than Cole Young? Who has the better tools to make it work in the long term? Does either have all-star upside? So we talked about Cole Young in last week's Mariners show. That's a show that released on Wednesday the 23rd. If you're on YouTube, I'll put a link to it right up here. But looking at Roman Anthony, I think most people prefer Anthony to Young looking at his situation, because we haven't talked about Roman Anthony on the pod in any sort of depth yet. 2022 second rounder compensatory pick out of high school. He has 90 games this year between A-ball and high A. And so between Salem and Greenville, what he's been able to do, 261, 392, 452, 12 home runs, 37 extra base hits, 73 walks to 103 strikeouts, and 13 to 20 on stolen bases for Roman Anthony. And left-handed hitter, what I like, just having watched, I've been able to see a little bit more of Greenville's games than I was expecting to, just watching for some Braves guys as well. And what I've been impressed with Roman Anthony, the times that I've seen him, is one, for a young player, I mean, he's 19 years old. He turns 20 in next May. So he's 19 all year this year. For a younger player, mechanically, he's very sound as far as upper half and lower half working together. Biomechanically, the way this works is you generate a lot of your rotational force through your lower body, and you transfer it into the upper body, down through the arms and into the bat. So if you are biomechanically sound on the upper and lower halves, you're better able to get your power out of your body, into your bat, into the ball. And he feels like he has very good mechanics and a very good connection biomechanically. He's obviously done some work on it, or hitters are born not made, and he's just naturally incredibly coordinated and athletically gifted. I do feel like I've seen him, he does really well, it feels, with fastballs, and he is not fazed by really good velocity. When he faces somebody that can absolutely fire one in there, he's not intimidated, he can catch up to it, he can make contact with it. Where it feels like he struggled is really with breaking pitches, sliders. It felt was a significant thing. I watched one team, maybe it was Rome, but I watched one team throw him 4 consecutive back foot sliders as a lefty. So, a righty throwing a slider is going to break in towards your feet. Just threw him 3 or 4 consecutive left foot sliders and struck him out. And then it feels like he struggles with lefties in general. So a little bit of platoon work. He hits righties significantly better than he hits lefties. So some work to do there. But I like the power ceiling for Roman Anthony. And I think his defense gets underrated. When you look at a lot of the prospect kind of stuff, I think Baseball America called him a 50 defensive as far as his speed, his defense, and his arm strength. They said it was 50 across the board. And watching him some while he's been in Greenville, I think he's a plus defender. I agree that the speed is probably average right now, and it may tick down a little bit if he adds more weight and things like that. His arm is average or so. I think it's enough for right field. But I think he's a plus defender in center field. He looks pretty natural out there. The reads, routes, reactions are all really good. He makes all of the plays you expect him to make, plus some of the ones you don't. And I think Roman Anthony's a plus defender. I do like how sound his mechanics are. I think I like Roman Anthony over Cole Young, not as a slight to Cole Young. I think Roman Anthony has the ability to be a special player. I think the Red Sox knew that's why they gave him $2.5 million to sign it number 79 overall. They understood, that's 3 times slot value. They understood he's a very good player and has the ability to be a difference maker. I think the end of the season next year, it is entirely possible that Roman Anthony is a top 15 prospect in baseball. The end of the year next year. Now, I don't know if he'll be in AAA, if he'll be in AA, but based on what I have seen, I think Roman Anthony can be one of the top prospects in all of baseball. And because of that, I have to take him over Cole Young simply because I think the ceiling is so high on Roman Anthony. Now, obviously, you have to watch those swing decisions. You have to watch that breaking stuff. That's got to get developed. He's got plenty of time to work on that in the offseason. Had a really interesting question, again, in response to that Seattle Mariners episode. Kevin on YouTube asked about MLB Pipeline had grades listed for Lazaro Montes. This was in response actually to the mailbag on Monday, where I said Lazaro Montes and Yordan Alvarez are very similar. And he said, why does Montes have a bunch of grades that are like 50, 60, 50 or so, but his overall rating's only a 45? Because I've seen it a lot of other places and I don't understand how the math works. And it's a really great question. And I think one of the things there, and Fangraphs does a good job of laying this out up front, is a lot of times those tool grades are the projected future tools, not what the guy currently is now. For Montes, they're talking about his hit tool's a 50, his power tool's a 60. They're saying if he reaches his potential, he can have a 60 grade power tool. If he reaches his potential, he can have a 50 grade hit tool. And again, Fangraphs does a very good job about actually listing the present value and the future value of each of the 5 tools. And so it's just understood or built into a lot of the other places. Baseball America doesn't separate present and future. MLB Pipeline doesn't separate present and future, because really what we care about is the future. And then they mention the things in the write-up that explain what are going to hold him back from getting to that. I understand why Fangraphs does it. It does help you understand it better, but that's the biggest thing. And then the other part of it, when you see overall ratings that don't necessarily make sense, is some places, I think Pipeline's one of these, they have the risk baked into the overall. Like Baseball America will give you a future value grade for the player of 50, a 45, a 55, whatever it might be, and then they'll give you a classifier for the risk. It's high risk, extreme, moderate, whatever it might be. Pipeline just has that future value, and they're having to bake the risk into that, because we don't talk about this on the show, but most prospects don't make it. That risk is something you have to consider. And so it's handled differently at every place, but that is typically how they do it. And that is why when you look at Pipeline, you'll see a bunch of tool grades that are higher than the overall rating, because the overall rating is where he's going to be if he gets to those future tool grades, and the risk of him not doing that baked into that number. Fantastic week this week. Reminder, if you have questions for the show, tons of ways to get them to us. Best one's probably our subtext. Links in the episode description, links in the show notes. Until tomorrow's show, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.